Hello everyone, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. My name is Esme and I'm a producer for the How To Academy, and you've tuned in to an Inkspots event with Kate Gilby Smith. Kate is a debut author and she's written a brilliant new adventure book called The Astonishing Future of Alex Nobody. She's going to be giving a short talk about her journey as an author and the story. Then she'll be giving a short reading and then it'll be over to you to ask her questions. Some of you have already sent some in, but please do ask lots. This can be about the book, about what it's like to be a writer, or just anything you can think of. You can send them in through the Q&A box and we'll try and get through as many as possible. So please join me in welcoming Kate Gilby Smith.
Well, thank you so much, Esme, and thank you to the How To Academy for having me. And thank you to all of you for being here on a Saturday morning. I'm so excited to be here to talk to you. I'm going to talk to you about my debut book, The Astonishing Future of Alex Nobody. Here it is. Excuse the ruler as a bookmark. That's important because I'm going to do a reading in a little bit. But first, I am going to start sharing my screen. Get that up. So here is the book, The Astonishing Future of Alex Nobody. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself before I tell you a little bit about the book. So here I am with a very embarrassing photo of me when I was 11 years old. I don't know how old you are. Maybe you're a bit younger than 11. Maybe you're a bit older. I'm definitely a bit older. But here I was when I was 11. And I've changed quite a lot since then, but also some things are the same. So my hair's a bit longer. I don't have the fringe. But just like when I was 11, I absolutely love reading. And when I was 11, I would stay up late into the night reading, and I would have so many books under my pillow that it was actually quite uncomfortable because my pillow would kind of be a bit kind of lopsided with stacks of books. And I would also, I don't know if you've ever done this, I won't tell your parents if you have, but I would stay up much later than I should. After my parents had turned off the light, I would stay up and I would continue reading when I shouldn't, because I absolutely loved books. And I'd like to show you some of the books that I really particularly loved. I don't know if you recognise any of these, I hope you do. So I was a really big fan of Philip Pullman when I was 11 years old. I still am now. And I was a big fan of Mallory Blackman, Noughts and Crosses. And I couldn't get enough of Jacqueline Wilson's Sleepovers and all of her books. I just couldn't get enough of them. Of course, I loved Harry Potter, and I loved The Magic Faraway Tree. And I was a massive fan of Roald Dahl. Matilda and the BFG were probably my favourites because I loved their characters. But most of all, I loved Eva Ibbotson. I don't know if you've ever read any of her books. If you haven't, I would really recommend them. These are a couple of my favourites. But when I was 11, I was very lucky and I got a box set of Eva Ibbotson books. And I just tore through all of these books. I loved them. And one of the things I really loved the most was Eva Ibbotson's way of telling stories and her voice and the way she really kind of brought to life characters, and they were all quite quirky and larger than life, and I absolutely loved it. And one of the things I felt, a bit of a strange feeling to have when you're reading a book, but I felt quite jealous. I would read Eva Ibbotson's books and I would look at her name on the cover and I felt really jealous. I thought, I would love to be able to tell stories like this. I want to be that storyteller in the book that's taking us away to kind of magical worlds and magical lands. And I really wanted to be, when I grew up, I wanted to be an author. So some people who are authors, they come to it later in life and they maybe wanted to be something else when they were younger. But I really wanted to be an author for as long as I can remember. So much so that I kind of thought that everyone wanted to be an author. I thought if somebody else said that they wanted to be a doctor or something else, they were kind of fibbing, because really what they wanted to do was to be a writer. And in general, I wasn't a very big fan of homework. I didn't really like kind of maths homework or other kind of homework. But what I really did love was English homework, where we got to write stories. And I would take my English book and my story book. This was when I was 11, but it went on later as well. And I had so much fun writing kind of mad adventures and mad stories. And I couldn't wait to do the homework. And when I gave that homework in, I was really excited to get it back. I wanted to know what the teacher thought, and I wanted to show my parents, and I absolutely loved it. And so that's what I wanted to be when I was older, but I kind of didn't think that that's what you could do. I thought, well, you can't, you know, this is fun, I love it, and I'm 11, but I didn't think you could really do it when you're older. So there was something else that I really loved when I was this age that I'd love to show you. Now, I don't know if you recognize any of these films or TV programs, but I was a huge fan when I was 11, and I still am now, of science fiction films and TV and books. So I hope you recognize Back to the Future with Marty McFly. I loved this film. And after I watched it, I had loads of questions. I felt really inspired. And I really wanted to travel back in time or forward in time. And I was also a massive fan of Doctor Who. And so as well as wanting to be an author, I also really wanted to be Doctor Who, which hasn't happened yet, unfortunately, but there's still time. So I was a big fan of that. And I also love the third Harry Potter book. You might recognize this scene here at the top because that is in the third Harry Potter film, and it's where they have the time turner. And I just thought, what an incredible idea. I wouldn't have used it like Hermione to do more lessons. It wasn't really my thing, but I would have used it in lots of other ways. And there's also the book The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, which was the very first book about time travel. And this is a children's version, and it's really brilliant. And all of these things really inspired me. As well as my love of books, I loved science fiction and these exciting films. So flash forward from when I'm 11 to when I'm 18. And I went to university. You might recognise where I went. I've put a few clues here. So I went to Edinburgh in Scotland. You can see Edinburgh Castle, which always reminded me quite a lot of Hogwarts, which I don't think was a coincidence. And I decided to study a degree in philosophy. And the reason I did that is because I've always really loved big, exciting questions. And that's what philosophy is all about. It's about asking questions, debating the answers, and also I was really indecisive. I couldn't really decide on one subject. And what philosophy allows you to do is to study loads of different subjects. And I loved that about philosophy. And when I started, I was so excited because one of the courses I could take as part of my philosophy degree was called the Philosophy of Time Travel. Now, having loved Doctor Who and Back to the Future, I couldn't believe my luck that I could study for my degree a philosophy of time travel course. And so, of course, what else could I do but sign up to take that course? And so I took the course and I was sitting in the back and I found it completely fascinating. And I learned all about time travel. In one of the lectures, though, it was quite a warm day even for Edinburgh, and I was kind of sitting in the back. And even though I was really interested, as I do quite a lot, I got a bit distracted. I don't know if you ever have that. Even if it's an interesting lesson, your mind might start to wander. So I was sitting in the back row and I was thinking, not listening, I was thinking about what I would do if I could travel back in time. And I started to think about all the places and the times I'd like to visit. And I started to think a little bit about all the people in time, the historical figures and people I'd like to go back in time to visit and meet. And so I thought about Albert Einstein and Jane Austen and Cleopatra. I thought I could go to ancient Egypt and meet Cleopatra, and how amazing that would be. So I was having all these kind of journeys in my head. I was asking Jane Austen for autographs, asking for a selfie with Albert Einstein. And then I started to think, I had this other thought about how weird it would be for Jane Austen or Albert Einstein or Cleopatra to have me turn up completely out of the blue with my selfie stick, asking for autographs, and how weird an experience that would be for them. And then I thought it'd be even weirder still if they hadn't yet done any of the astonishing things they went on to do, because they were still only a kid. So Albert Einstein was only 12 and I turned up asking for his autograph. And that's when I had the idea for a character who becomes famous in the future, and people who I call time tourists are traveling back in time to meet her, because one day in the future she becomes famous. But the problem for this character, who I call Alex, is she has absolutely no idea why she becomes famous in the future. So that's Alex Nobody. From the very time that she's born, in the hospital, these people turn up in double-decker coaches and they're dressed like tourists with their sun hats and beach sarongs, and they're trying to get a glimpse of the baby. That's Alex. And they're there on the day of her school play, and they're crowding the aisles, and they have binoculars because they want to get the best view of Alex. And they see her in the supermarket, and they leapfrog over tins of soup just to shake her hand. Now, all that's very strange, and Alex does think that's a bit weird, but she doesn't know any better, so she kind of puts it down to living in a really small town where people can be quite eccentric. That's until on the day of her 12th birthday, she throws a birthday party. Now, no one turns up to her birthday party, which is really sad, and it's because she doesn't really kind of get on with lots of the people in her class, and they tend to think she's a bit weird, and she loves maths and science, and she just can't seem to make many friends. But then on the day of her 12th birthday party, a boy called Jasper turns up on her doorstep, and they become fast friends. Now, Jasper doesn't think Alex is weird. He doesn't kind of look at her like she said something really strange. They get on really well. And Jasper seems to have some idea as to why people dressed as tourists have turned up throughout Alex's life and seem to know who she is. But before Jasper can tell Alex the secret, he disappears. And so Alex ends up traveling 80 years into the future to find Jasper, to find out where he's gone and why he suddenly vanished, but also to work out the secret of her astonishing future. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book in just a minute, but first I'd like to take you very, very quickly go through some of the things about time travel that I learned in that course, because I think they're really fascinating. So I'd like to take you very quickly through these things. So time travel, I did this course and this is what I learned. I'd love for you to think a little bit about whether you think that time travel is possible. Do you think it might be possible one day? Do you think it might be already possible? Have a little think about that, and I'll tell you what Albert Einstein thinks in the meantime. So Albert Einstein thought that it was possible, but you could only travel into the future. And the way that would work is that if you travel really, really fast, now faster than in a car or in a plane, if you travel at the speed of light, or almost at the speed of light, something really strange happens. So I'll explain that. So if all of us got into a spaceship, so all of you watching and me, we got into a spaceship and we traveled around the galaxy at the speed of light, and we went for about a year. We spent a year on the spaceship. I would have my 30th birthday, you might have a birthday, we'd have some parties, be a good time. We traveled for a year. When we got back home, a year would have passed for us, but much longer would have passed back on Earth. It could have been thousands or many thousands of years. So we would have traveled into the future. Now, there was another way that some scientists think we might be able to travel in time. Now, again, we need to get onto our spaceship, as you can see here, and we would go park our spaceship next to a black hole, which you can see in this picture here, or this kind of drawing. And we'd go park ourselves right by the black hole. Now, quite dangerous. Logistically, there's a few kind of problems that come up here because we could get sucked into the black hole and end up looking like spaghetti, and it's very dangerous. But if none of that happened and it was all fine, we could spend a week or so next to the black hole, and by the time we got home, much longer will have passed for everyone back home. It could have been, 100 years, 1,000 years. So those are two ways, but there's a bit of a problem because we don't want to just travel really far into the future, do we? We kind of want to get back home and tell our friends about what we saw. And this would kind of be stuck into the future. So there's one other way that scientists think that we could be able to travel in time, and that is through something called a wormhole. And fortunately, it's nothing to do with worms, but what it is a kind of a tunnel that goes through space and time. And so it would allow us to go through the tunnel, and we could go to the future or the past, and then we could come all the way back through the tunnel and be back home for tea, which will be nice. The problem is scientists don't really know how to make these wormholes, and they've never found them in the universe. But theoretically, it's possible. We just don't know how to do it yet. So there is another way of traveling in time that I discovered when I was researching the book. So I had the idea of Alex Nobody, but I needed to do a lot of research before I actually set out to write it. And it took me about 7 years. So I first had the idea about 7 years ago, and now here I am today with the book. So I did lots of research in that time. And one of the things I discovered when I was researching about time travel was something called time crystals. Now, I know it sounds like I've completely made this up, but some scientists think that time crystals could be a way of traveling in time. And now it doesn't look exactly like this. It's not an actual crystal. So don't be disappointed if you find a crystal and it doesn't send you back in time. But it's quite complicated, and I'm not a physicist, so I can't explain it very well. But reading about these time crystals, I felt really inspired. And so I took this inspiration from reading about this incredible scientific kind of research, and I put it into the book, and I used that as part of the story. And that is something that I would really recommend if you are a budding writer and you want to write your stories. The best way I find to do that is to read lots, is to listen lots. It might be something you hear on TV or something you read in a book or something that somebody tells you, but you can take that little bit of inspiration, like about the time crystal, and you can use that in your stories. And so in The Astonishing Future of Alex Nobody, Alex and Jasper and everybody in the book use time crystals to travel back in time and to go visit people in the past. Now I'm going to read a very short section from the book. It's going to take a couple of minutes. But first I should tell you what's happened just before. So as I said, Alex has travelled 80 years into the future because she wants to find Jasper and find out what happened to him. And so to do that, she snuck into one of the double-decker coaches. Those are the coaches that the people I call time tourists are coming back in time to visit Alex. So she sneaks into the back of one, and she doesn't know where she's going to go. And she goes on this really bumpy journey. And on the other side, when she arrives, she runs out of the coach because she doesn't want to be discovered and to get into trouble. And she just keeps running. She doesn't know where she is. And she bumps into quite a fearsome lady called Gertie. And that has just happened in this section. So I'm going to read that part and you'll see what Alex discovers when she's travelled 80 years into the future. What is this place? Alex asked nobody in particular. The coach station, dearie, said the woman. Haven't you been here before? It's a strange place, that's for sure. The finest place in the world for people watching, though. The coach station. Sure enough, when Alex looked behind her, she saw rows and rows of white double-decker coaches. Beside the closest one, people were collecting their luggage from the driver, who was rubbing his shoulder and looking around with a sour look. Were you on that coach? The woman asked. Your outfit is very good, really tremendous. Most time tourists go way overboard with what they wear. They try to blend in with what they think people wore on their holidays, based on old travel brochures and photos that people posted of themselves online, as if any of that reflected real life. But your outfit is beautifully researched, very authentic. Alex glanced down at herself doubtfully. You would have to be very odd to think her school uniform was tremendous. Though very odd might not be too far from the truth, Alex thought, as she took in what the woman herself was wearing, a hooded green gown that fell in pleats to her ankles and had very baggy batwing sleeves. Poking out from the bottom of the gown were two neon pink jelly sandals. What coach station is this? Where are... Alex stopped dead. A group of people wearing sun hats and beach sarongs were hurrying across the marble floor. Tourists, just like the sort of people who had turned up throughout her life without explanation. They chatted excitedly and pulled bulging suitcases in the direction of the coaches. More tourists, Alex whispered. So this was where they come from, wherever this was. That didn't explain, though, what they were doing travelling to Merford, or why Jasper thought he needed to protect Alex from them. Watching them bundle towards the coaches, Alex thought that the tourists couldn't have looked more harmless. There was nothing particularly threatening about people wearing open-toed sandals and khaki shorts. But then again, Jasper certainly seemed to think they were dangerous. Maybe she should watch them from a distance. On the other hand, they might know something about where Jasper was. Who are all these people? Where are they going? She asked. Where? Scoffed the woman, scratching the fine hairs on her chin. Don't you mean when? When are they going? When are they going? Alex repeated. Time travel. The words resounded in her head. Don't get carried away, she told herself. After all, it was one thing to suspect time travel was possible, and quite another to have those suspicions confirmed. But when are they going doesn't make grammatical sense. If you say so, replied the woman coolly. Shouldn't you be getting back to your family? They'll be worried, I'm sure. And I have things to be getting on with, other than getting grammar lessons from a child, that is. She looked anxiously around. Besides, I have a time guard on my tail today, so I shouldn't stay in one place for too long. I'd finally managed to lose him when I bumped into you, but it won't be long before he catches up. Alex felt suddenly very odd. The sun shone brightly through the glass ceiling above, drawing beads of sweat from her temples. She had a strong desire to be back among people she knew, even those classmates who ignored her or called her names. The thought of their company seemed almost comforting right now. Plus, if she didn't get back soon, Mrs. Wright, her head teacher, was going to be furious with her. Do you know where I can find the ticket office? She asked the woman. I need to get on a coach straight away back home. It can't be too far, not more than a few towns away. Even as she said it, Alex wasn't convinced. She knew there was no coach station like this anywhere near Merford. The woman's eyebrow hair bristled. You won't find a coach to take you home here, I'm afraid. This isn't that kind of station. Not that kind of station, Alex squeaked. No, these coaches only travel to the past.
Hi, Kate. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. I love hearing all about your studies of time travel. What a brilliant thing to be able to study at university. We've got a couple of questions coming already, but please keep asking them because I love lots of questions. And so the first question is from Darcy, who's 10, and she asked, was it scary writing a book for the first time?
Darcy, that's such a great question. It is quite scary because you have to write the whole book and you don't know if anyone's going to read it. And also you have the idea and then you just have no idea actually how to write it. And I don't know about you, but I've written a lot of stories where I have the idea in my head and I know what I want to write. And then I try to write it and it just doesn't work out. And you get really frustrated because you think, oh, it's rubbish. This isn't what I wanted to write. And so it was quite scary in that front because you have to kind of just give it a go. But what I found is that when I tried and I wrote a draft, it wasn't very good. And I thought, well, that's fine, I'll try again. And I kept trying and I kept trying, and it took a lot of work. And that really helped me, was just keep editing, keep writing. And so if you find that you're a bit scared or intimidated when writing a story, just realize that the first try doesn't have to be very good. You can keep going and keep going. And that's what I found, and that really helped me.
Great answer. Sophie says, Kate, the book sounds amazing and I can't wait to read it. Did any real life people inspire your characters?
That's a very good question. And something that I found was that you don't always know where the inspiration comes from. And so I think lots of the characters I might have pinched a few characteristics here and there from people I know and family members. and it was only when I was reading the book, I think, oh, maybe this person I know has inspired that. And one funny thing I had was when, so as I said before, one of the main characters is called Jasper. And I thought that I'd just kind of come up with the idea of Jasper and the name came into my head. And it was only when my family pointed out that our old cat was called Jasper. He was a lovely cat. And I had kind of pinched the cat's name and put him into a book, but I didn't even realize that at first. So you might find that too, that when you're writing a story, inspiration can come from all sorts of places and you don't necessarily realize at the time that you put Jasper as a main character in your book. Yeah.
I'm sure Jasper would be pleased to know that lives on in literature. Sheehan asks, why did you choose to tell a story about a time machine, or what other story would you have wanted to write?
Oh, that's a great question, because when you're writing a story, you might have loads of different ideas, and it's quite hard to pick which idea you want to write. I don't know if you have that too, and so you really have to commit to that story. But I think with the time traveling idea, it was something that I didn't write straight away. It took me quite a few years to get around to writing it, but it really stuck into my head. And I kept thinking about it and I didn't know where to start. And when I thought, aha, this is where to start, and I thought more about the character of Alex, I got really obsessed with the story. And I couldn't put it away in the back of my mind. And that was when I knew, okay, this is an idea I really have to write. But at the same time, there were loads of other ideas that came into my head. And there's loads of different inspiration, and I try to write them down. I make a note on my phone, but this idea really I couldn't get out of my head about time travel. And as I say, it's something that I've been really fascinated about since I was really young. And so it felt like the right idea to write.
Andrew asked, there are lots of historical figures in the book. Were you aware of all of these people before you started?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are lots of historical figures in the book. And so, because one of the things a time tourist can do, they can go back in time and meet famous people from the past. And so I had to do lots of research about historical figures. And there were people that I'd already heard of, like Albert Einstein and Jane Austen and Cleopatra, who I mentioned. But then I did lots of research to find other historical figures as well. And so there's loads of people I found really fascinating. And I just got really carried away with doing this research because I would find somebody that I thought was really interesting. And I kind of then wanted to write a 1,000-page book about them. And I had to stop myself. So there are lots of people in there. So there's someone called Fatima Al-Fihri, and she was famous because she lived about 1,200 years ago. And she started the world's very first university in Morocco. And you can still go there today. The library's still there, and it's incredible. And I thought she was so fascinating. And so I did loads of research about her, and I put her into the book. And so there's lots of different historical figures that I had to do research about, and I had loads of fun. And I'm hoping that children will have fun. Maybe there'll be people they've heard of, or maybe people they haven't, and they'll have fun kind of looking them up and learning about them afterwards.
It's a great idea. Lorraine says, would you like to write for Doctor Who? And if so, which Doctor?
Yes, please. I would love to write for Doctor Who. And that would be a childhood dream. Which Doctor? I think maybe Jodie Whittaker. I think I mean, I always wanted to be Doctor Who, so I think it's fantastic seeing Jodie Whittaker as Doctor Who. I was already a huge fan of David Tennant. So maybe I could do a special with all the Doctor Who's. Yeah, I'm being ambitious. I think that's what I'd quite like to do because it's hard to choose.
Good to be ambitious. We have one final question, which is a brilliant question, and it's from Lucy, who's 9. And she says, if you could travel back in time, where would you go? And she says, I would want to meet the Aztecs.
Lucy, that's such a great idea. I want to come to the Aztecs as well. That'd be so much fun. I would really love to go back in time to some of the really far back and some of the times that we don't know that much about them. So the Aztecs are, really great idea. I'd quite like to go back to ancient Egypt. I'm quite food oriented, so I'd quite like to go back and try food from like ancient Romans, some of the things you learn about. I would love to do that. And I kind of made myself a time travel itinerary when I was writing the book, and I was like, I'll start in ancient Egypt, go to the Aztecs now, that's a great idea. I'd like to go to Mesopotamia because that was when they came up with, I think they invented the wheel and they came up with the concept of time. And I'd love to know who did that. I could ask a few questions. So just endless places I'd like to go back in time to visit and spend a few weeks. So yeah, Aztecs though, Lucy, is a really good idea.
A great question, and something very fun for us all to ponder for the rest of the weekend. Kate, thank you so much for doing your talk. I really enjoyed listening to you, and thank you for everyone who sent in lots of questions. It's always fun seeing all your fantastic ideas. Please do join us again for another Inkspots event. We've got one after this with the amazing illustrator Rob Biddle, who you might know as Draw with Rob. But we've also got an environmentalist next week and a chef the week after. So there's a nice big range. But everyone do find Kate's book in a local bookshop. It's fantastic, especially like the bit when they go into a school. I won't tell you anymore, but it's very Hogwartsy. It's very fun. Kate, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you so much, Esme, and thank you all for watching, and have a lovely Saturday.
It's been brilliant having you. Bye, Kate. Bye, everyone.